Angela Merkel was one of the few leaders that reacted at this. Clearly, there is some worry, not just for the Eurozone, but for the EU economy as a whole. Yesterday, the European Commission said that it was following the situation closely. The European Central Bank has not officially reacted yet, but we know they're also following the situation. And according to their assessment, the situation is not critical yet. The main worry here is that you have some European banks that are exposed to the Turkish crisis. They're owed money by the Turkish banks, especially Spanish banks, up to more than 80 billion euros. So there's clearly a fear from these banks that the Turkish borrowers will start defaulting on their foreign currency loans. If you look at the foreign currency loans in Turkey, they account for about 40% of the total assets of Turkish banks. So they're very important for Turkey. For Europe now, this is a debate. In total, the exposure is 130 billion euros. If you look at the total of EU banks, that's a lot of money, but it's not enough to really cause a big crisis within Europe or within the Eurozone. The main problem, again, when you have these financial crises or these economic crises, is about confidence. It's about trust and the fears that this could spill over into other countries, other economies, and then have wider implications for the European economy as well.
Absolutely, and this is obviously far wider than just a financial crisis, isn't it? How far could it go?
Yeah, clearly, this is just not. It's not just about the financial markets. It's not just about Europe. But if you look at trade, for example, at the moment the EU runs a trade surplus with Turkey. Now, if the lira continues to fall, then it will become much harder for Turkish consumers to buy foreign goods, and that could affect, of course, EU exporters. If you look at migration, we know that there are more than 3 million refugees and migrants that are currently staying in Turkey. If the Turkish economy keeps going down this hole at the moment and this crisis, then there's a fear in Europe that these migrants could come to Europe. But in general, there's also a fear for investment in emerging economies. Over the last 10, 20 years, emerging economies were a magnet for foreign investors. And we saw that currencies in Argentina, in Brazil, in South Africa, in Russia have all tanked following this crisis. So this is really a problem of confidence. And as Angela Merkel said, she's really calling for the independence of the central bank. But we know that in Turkey at the moment, this is not really the case. Markets have been calling for Mr. Erdogan to raise the interest rates as a way to control the fall of the lira, also to control inflation. He has flatly refused because he's afraid that that will affect economic growth. And we know that economic growth in Turkey is a measure of Mr. Erdogan's success and that his popularity depends on the economic growth of the Turkish economy.